In this podcast episode, Kevin Mandia, a veteran of American cyber defense and founder of Mandian and Armadan, shares his deep expertise on cybersecurity, nation-state hacking, cyber espionage, and the evolving landscape of cyber warfare. The discussion covers the real impacts of cyber attacks on individuals and companies, details about state-sponsored cyber threats from countries like China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, insights into landmark hacking incidents such as the SolarWinds breach, and the future role of AI in offensive and defensive cyber operations. Mandia also explores the vulnerabilities of U.S. critical infrastructure, the politicization of cyber incidents, and the complex challenges of social media manipulation in modern conflicts. Mandia opens by describing the emotional and psychological toll cyber attacks take on individuals, especially when private emails, photos, or sensitive information are stolen and potentially leaked to the public. While companies may recover from reputational or operational disruptions, people whose personal data is exposed often experience severe distress and intrusion into their private lives. He emphasizes the ongoing daily reality that individuals and organizations face, not just isolated events, but a constant barrage of attacks. He also discusses the complexity of ransom and extortion demands, explaining that whether to pay is never a straightforward decision and depends heavily on the context, such as in hospitals or critical infrastructure where lives could be at stake. The origin of many ransomware and extortion operations is traced largely to organized criminal groups based in Russia, with the Chinese government notably following a different approach focused on espionage without extortion. Mandia recounts his early years growing up in Pittsburgh during difficult economic times and his initial interest in sports and computing. His pathway into cybersecurity began unintentionally when stationed at the Pentagon in 1993 as a young Air Force officer. Assigned to one of the few available computer security roles, Mandia became involved in early efforts to monitor military networks and investigate unauthorized access. He describes his initial encounters with Chinese cyber espionage, targeting over 20 military installations through compromised university accounts, and how this experience shaped his understanding of cyber threats. At the time, defensive measures and responses were minimal, leading to long-running cases handled primarily through intelligence and counterintelligence operations. Mandia distinguishes between the motivations and tactics of various nation-state hackers. China conducts massive-scale cyber espionage with tactical restraint, typically stealing vast amounts of data without destruction or extortion. Russia, on the other hand, historically displayed superior tradecraft focused on stealth and precision, often stealing selectively and practicing counter-forensics to evade detection. However, in recent years, Russian operations have become noisier and less disciplined. North Korea operates predominantly as a financially motivated actor, while Iran engages primarily in disruptive activities such as data deletion. There is a noted difference in the ethical codes or rules of engagement each nation-state follows, with China largely avoiding destructive and extortionist actions compared to Russia's broader tactics. Criminal groups, meanwhile, seek direct financial gain, often monetizing breaches in multiple ways. Mandia highlights the groundbreaking 2013 report his company authored, which publicly exposed a Chinese military unit, PLA Unit 61398, responsible for widespread cyber espionage campaigns against over 140 U.S. companies across 20 industries. This unprecedented transparency forced a wider recognition of Chinese cyber operations and shaped global cybersecurity policy. Mandia shares how the report was a bold move by his ex-military team at Mandian to push the U.S. government and industry toward information sharing and defense collaboration. The report coincided with major media outlets like the New York Times revealing their own compromises. The impact was immediate, driving Chinese hackers to retreat temporarily, but also highlighting the challenge of addressing espionage in an interconnected global economy where foreign nationals work within U.S. institutions. Mandia also touches on how espionage in universities and personnel vulnerabilities contribute to ongoing risks. Mandia offers a nuanced view on the Snowden revelations, expressing his trust in the NSA's mission and oversight mechanisms despite acknowledging legitimate concerns about privacy and government overreach. He stresses the importance of checks and balances and freedom of the press, emphasizing that whistleblowing can be valuable but should be handled carefully. Mandia points out that most surveillance requires legal authorization, such as FISA court approval, and describes his own experience having to secure judicial permissions to monitor communications. He also draws a distinction between government surveillance and the massive data collection performed by marketing firms, noting that the latter collects far more personal data but poses less direct national security threat. Mandia recounts the SolarWinds attack, one of the most significant cyber incidents in U.S. history, where Russian hackers inserted a backdoor into SolarWinds' Orion software updates, compromising thousands of government agencies and major corporations over an extended period without detection. As CEO of FireEye, Mandian's public company incarnation, Mandia shares his personal experience discovering that his own red team tools had been stolen and publicly disclosing the breach against legal advice to warn the community. He describes the intense pressure, constant discovery of further compromises, and coordination with government agencies and cybersecurity companies like Microsoft and CrowdStrike. The incident highlighted the sophistication of the attackers, their precision targeting, and the challenges of coordinating a national response given the informal nature of cybersecurity alliances. The discussion shifts to real-world impacts on critical infrastructure, notably the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident in 2021, which resulted in a 6-day fuel supply disruption and a multi-million-dollar ransom payment. Mandia lauds Colonial Pipeline's leadership and the complexity of responding to cyber attacks where physical systems are affected and uncertainty and fear dominate. He notes the ripple effects such attacks can have on everyday life, such as outages of services, hospital operations, and supply chains. He addresses concerns about worst-case scenarios around attacks on the power grid and water treatment facilities, emphasizing that while large utilities have redundancy and defenses, smaller municipalities are far more vulnerable to blunt force trauma cyber attacks that could cause outages or even contamination. He explains the subtlety of potential attacks that could pollute or erode services slowly, requiring deep operational knowledge of each system, since utility networks vary and are often inadequately segmented from corporate IT systems. Mandia characterizes Russia as a two-faced threat consisting of proficient foreign intelligence services and aggressive criminal groups. China leads in sheer volume and sophistication, with extensive zero-day development and a focus on economic and military espionage conducted under unofficial rules of engagement. Iran's threats are more disruptive and destructive, mainly aimed at deletion of data, while North Korea operates primarily financially motivated hacking operations and uniquely exploits remote work trends by embedding IT professionals within U.S. companies to conduct theft. He details how these actors differ in tactics and sophistication, and how cyber conflicts today resemble a crowded and dangerous neighborhood with multiple hostile gangs operating simultaneously. Mandia highlights the unique vulnerability of the United States due to its constitutional freedoms, especially the First Amendment, which allow for widespread dissemination of information without centralized censorship. He discusses how foreign actors, especially Russia, exploit social media platforms by artificially amplifying divisive content to sow discord and influence public opinion, often without regard to ideological consistency, pushing contradictory narratives to exacerbate social fractures. Mandia recalls early intelligence warnings about such influence campaigns as far back as 2015 and emphasizes the difficulty of distinguishing genuine public opinion from manufactured amplification. He also notes the mental health consequences linked to social media, with increasing rates of depression and suicide corresponding with the rise of smartphones and platforms designed around engagement algorithms. Mandia predicts that AI will transform cyber warfare by automating vulnerability discovery, exploitation, and remediation at unprecedented speed and scale. Offensive AI agents can launch thousands of concurrent attacks, learn from every attempt instantly, and find multiple paths into networks far faster than human teams could. This compression of attack timelines means defense must also automate constantly to keep pace. He describes his new venture, Armadin, which develops autonomous AI cyber offense tools used to test and harden defenses proactively, essentially building the best cyber offense to prepare defenders and elevate security standards down to small utilities and businesses that currently lack resources. Mandia sees AI as both the near-term challenge and the long-term solution, forecasting a difficult transition period where attackers hold an advantage until defensive AI matures. Throughout the episode, Mandia stresses preparedness and fallback plans. For individuals, he advises families to develop emergency plans, maintain ways to communicate during disruptions, and be aware of privacy and security risks in their digital lives. For businesses, especially critical infrastructure and restaurants, he emphasizes the importance of red lever drills, testing the ability to operate offline or under compromised conditions. For the broader society, Mandia underscores the critical role of major tech companies in providing robust wartime-grade defenses, as well as the need for improved mandatory breach disclosure laws that enable national learning from compromise rather than secrecy. Closing the conversation, Mandia reflects on his personal journey from the Air Force through leading premier cybersecurity firms and now pioneering AI-driven cyber offense. He recommends notable guests such as New York Times reporter Nicole Perlroth, who brings a human storytelling perspective on hacking and its consequences, and highlights the importance of apolitical, fact-based discussions around security and geopolitics. Mandia emphasizes the need for thoughtful discourse and critical thinking in a world rife with disinformation and complex cyber and geopolitical challenges.